Thank you very much, and thank you, April, and to the entire chamber for allowing me this opportunity. I go back about 6 weeks ago, and April called and said, listen, what's going on? And all of my members are calling, and can you give us some answers? So I've been tasked to do that, and we'll see where this discussion takes us. But listen, let me say thanks to Tommy, you here, any government officials. We appreciate all that you do and support. And to my staff, in particular our leadership group, this is not a story, as I tell you guys on and on about Johnny Milazzo standing before you today. It really is a testimony about your hard work. So thank you very much. You know, as we begin this discussion about the rapidly increase in prices, as April and I talked about, today I want to offer my thoughts, and keep in mind they're mine, as well as some shared thoughts from some colleagues around the country that I do trust. And I want to be careful that this doesn't turn into a discussion of the future. Let's leave that up to Lauren Scott and some of the other economists. I'm just here to tell you and to share my thoughts of what impacts prices as we see them today. So as a result of the call and follow up and my willingness to come here, I thought what I would share with you is what truly makes up the cost of a gallon of fuel. And there are four main components to that. And I'll share with you, as of January of 2022, taking the average price of $3.41 a gallon, 15% of that retail price, or about 50 cents a gallon, was for taxes. In the state of Louisiana, were 24 on diesel fuel and 18.4 on the federal side. Distribution and marketing, which is really where we sit, makes up 16%, or about 55 cents a gallon. Refining makes up 14%, or about 48 cents. And the rest of that is crude at 56%. As of January, that was about $1.90. If I look back on a 52-week period, crude has hovered or has had a low of $64 and a high, which has been alarming to all of us, at $140 a barrel. And let me add in that distribution and marketing piece, what you don't realize is that credit card fees are indeed a significant part of that. And as prices go north, so do the fees. I got a good friend of mine here in the banking industry, and this is not intended to pick on you, Kevin, but fact of the matter is, in NACS, at their State of the Industry report, this is the National Association of Convenience Stores, this month reported in 2021 that our industry paid $10.7 billion in credit card fees. That's an average of 2.22% for every gallon sold. And so what I will talk about is what is the role that crude plays in this. So looking back and collecting as much information to share with you the world in which we see, since 2006, on average, crude oil has been responsible for 58% of the retail price of gasoline. Quite consistent. If we look back, and this is not to get political or pick on the current administration by any means, I thought I would share another incredible slide because, quite frankly, all this didn't just get started. I'll go over that with you in just a minute. So let me, as we discuss the causes, let me share with you, and please keep this in mind, that the U.S. produces 11.5 million barrels per day of refined product and imports 6.1. You can see that it is a global economy regarding crude that impacts this. And that's distributed by 9 million barrels per day in gas, which is equivalency of 378 million gallons, 4 million barrels in diesel, 168 million gallons, and the balance of that goes to aviation, home heating, and other categories. And those gallons are supplied to 145,000 retail locations throughout the U.S., of which 2,677 of those are here in Louisiana. In addition, Louisiana is responsible for 3 billion gallons of gasoline and 500 million gallons of diesel on an annual basis, just to put in perspective what we see in our local economy here. And so, as I mentioned to April, going into the start of the war in Ukraine, we were already seeing a strain on supply as the economy was in a very robust recovery from COVID. Since January of 2021 to the beginning of the war, we had already seen a price escalation of $1.10 from $2.40 a gallon in January of 21 to $3.50 prior to the start. And this is pointing out to the inauguration, to the beginning of the war. Represents $1.10 pre-war, okay? So what's happened since then? So looking at the conditions leading up to March and the many challenges we were experiencing with supply and the transportation that I would think in the business community so many of us are experiencing. Tremendous shortage of drivers, well publicized. So my view today, looking back, should not be a surprise. Prices had already climbed over $1. The economy was really soaring, and tremendous pressure that we let supply really, if you think back to the beginning of the pandemic and all the responsible companies, the Exxons, the Shells, independent refiners, the list goes on and on. When we saw a decline, not just in our world, but aviation had all but collapsed, the responsible thing for those guys to do is to cut back. And what we know today is the restart isn't just an instant process. It does take time. And after the change in administration, there's been a tremendous amount of changes in the standards, which are very costly on the production side. Leave refining out for just a moment. So if you think about what really causes all that volatility, there are really three things. One, it comes into demand. And if you look at the demand side, as I mentioned to you, we had a huge swing, right? In a very short period of time when you think about it, where no one's moving. There was a time, it's hard to believe this, that you can get across the Mississippi River Bridge from Denham Springs in about 12 minutes. That's unheard of, right? In prior COVID times and even today. And then we see this supply issue that has been cut back, and all of a sudden demand has been as robust as it has, and we've set the stage for a crisis. And that led to this, what we saw was an increase, a pretty substantial increase, leading up to the beginning of the war. And then you find yourselves in a situation, the industry, where there's uncertainty. And that's where the biggest part of the volatility comes. When the market doesn't really know what's up for tomorrow. And I kind of summed it up this way. I really believe where we are today is that this is a war of attrition. It seems as though the markets better understand where they are today, what may come about tomorrow, perhaps even next week. And so the levels of volatility that we were seeing early on, price swings as much as 30, 50, I think, guys help me here, we have one day the largest increase was 96 cents, only to correct itself in a few days. So where does the future really take us? I think in this country, when I mentioned to you, we're at over 11, if you look at our production piece, 11 billion gallons versus barrels versus the 5 on the import side, we've got to do a better job of balancing our international reliability. I don't know that we will ever erase the fact that these companies are invested internationally, where you can say to them it's not fair to price your crude where other markets are willing to pay you for it. But there's some work to be done, I think, governmentally, where relaxing some of the standards that we see today, but doing it safely. We've already proved that we can. I say we, the industry, and allowing folks to, like Exxon, Chevron, BP, the list goes on, to get back to doing what they do best and not rob them of the opportunity where we become so dependent on foreign oil. Leading up to the war, Russia was responsible of 10% of the world crude demand. And through sanctions today, you can only imagine what that did to volatility. Now, what we've discovered, or what the industry's discovered, is maybe it's not as bad as it appears. Predictability seems better, and we're not seeing those days that we saw in early March. So I'd like to share with you that tomorrow's going to be better. But unfortunately, the things that control this still exist. Are we going to see another disturbance? If so, and if things don't change in the U.S., as far as, erasing our dependency on foreign crude, we're likely to see more of this. You guys have, I'm sure you have seen the news. There's all sorts of discussions now about what does E15 do, and President, in his press release, is going to make a temporary waiver. Keep in mind this is temporary, so that we as retailers can sell E15 if we can or choose. The fact of the matter is, if you think about those 145,000 retail locations across the U.S., so few of those are capable today because of equipment to sell E15. We don't have a single facility in our dealer group that can do that today. Of our company-owned stores, we have 2. But that would require us giving up another product, which is a difficult decision. So E15 is not going to change the consumer's life in lowering prices at any reasonable amount. He predicted 10 cents. That's if 145,000 facilities nationwide embrace the idea. Not in the cards. You guys have seen the push for EVs. Our industry is truly under attack. I think about, would we be better off if we were Lard Oil distribution rather than, or Lard distribution rather than Lard Oil? Because the word oil is not always greeted with a sense of respect it deserves. And so, are electric vehicles going to change the world? And some research, because we're giving consideration to this. By 2030, they're expected to have 18 million electric vehicles on the road. That makes up 6% of U.S. vehicles registered. And that's going to come in 15 states will have about 60% of those 18 million vehicles. Louisiana is not one of those. And maybe a last thought on that. I think back to the hurricanes, the evacuation process, getting people out of harm's way. Electric vehicles would not work in those circumstances. And we discovered that for some vehicles that were struggling to get the necessary energy they needed to get out of harm's way. So what could work if we can get our government more in line, and that is we have CAFE standards today which are requiring the manufacturer of automotive vehicles to improve mileage standards. And that is truly the answer, and we're seeing some of that now. If you look at the demand for gasoline through 2030, we're seeing about a 7% decline, while at the same time, we see about a flat line for diesel fuel. So one last comment in respect to diesel fuel. I kind of expected a question would come up. Why in the world is diesel fuel, when you look at the refining cost, being less than gasoline, today at $1 a gallon more? And, you know, again, I get back to supply and demand of that. And then a few years ago, if you think about seaborne activity, where all the ships now have to fuel with a different standard, and that is low sulfur. Wasn't too long ago in our business, we thought when we deliver fuel on the diesel side, it was low sulfur and high sulfur. Today it's all the same content, it's just red and clear. And now we see that on the ships today. So that demand, the increased standards for products has indeed, you know, led to what we see as a rise in cost in that product as well, led by an incredible demand. So I don't know if it answers all of your questions, and I'm here to do my best to answer any of you that have one. I'm surprised. Oh, go ahead, John.
You hit a lot on this there at the end with the EVs. And I know it has to go on in some of your meetings around your office. What, if you had to put it out there, how many generations do you think it'll take before those become an equivalent? And you just said there's hopefully by 2030, 6% of the vehicles. The EV stuff is, and the guy wearing a hat, in the layman's terms, is creating a lot of this volatility because of the push for green renewables. And we all know, common sense tells you we can't get off of fossil fuel for a long, long time. Infrastructure's not there and not even close. So if you had to guess, put you on the spot a little bit, how many generations before you feel like it would be an equivalent?
Well,
Since you are under attack.
yeah, and again, this is just sharing my personal thoughts. I've got friends, from across the U.S. We share thoughts, ideas, even financials, geographically selected. So we're not price fixing antitrust, and so we got something to look at, right? And for those, particularly in the Northeast, that have gone down this path. And John, and for all of us here today, we're here as a business community. So we do this when it makes sense from a return standpoint. The economics in that make no sense today. And what I mentioned a moment ago during an evacuation, is what's the infrastructure that supports that? Today, you look down and says, oh, heck, I better stop and get some fuel. And that could take, 10 minutes. You could, if you pulled in a commercial charger today, you got somewhere between 50 and an hour and 15 to get a fill-up equivalent. So, and then where does the cost fit, right? Because the economics of the purchase of the vehicle, the life of the battery. And so I think there's enough uncertainty today. We're not seeing someone racing to make that purchase. But I got to tell you, when I look at the 2040 industry report from ExxonMobil, we're still seeing a considerable demand for what we do. And that's taken us, 18 years down the road. So this is going to be a while. We're so unfortunate in Louisiana. I don't want to pick on the utilities, but we don't have the ability to hit the switch for quite some time here. I mean, that's going to be a while. So, will we see an uptick? What does that look like? 1-2% a year? I think we'll know more in 2030. But keep in mind, who's the most likely buyer of an EV? I mean, if you look at those areas where you're seeing a population growth, people that don't drive much, they have the ability to plug in. If you live in an apartment or some place where you don't have a garage, you're not as fortunate. So there's a lot. It's all going to be about the ability of convenience. If I own that car, where's the infrastructure to put me back on the road at a more reasonable time than I can today? I'd be afraid to really, we're still building stores today that sell fuel. And if you look at the commercial demand for energy to charge a car, it's expensive and it's hard to recover that. So I got guys invested, upwards of $350,000, $400,000 to charge 5 cars a day. Those economics don't make sense.
They're definitely being subsidized, though. All of
Well,
that,
and that's what's no doubt about it. And we look at that too. So facilities we're building today, we'll have the infrastructure to add charging stations. And if we add them today, what does the government subsidy look like? Even if it's just can we make it as though we're advancing into the future? And there's some thought going around that. If we were investing in increasing mileage standards, it really is the answer. No one's waiting to plug in somewhere. But that doesn't sound good, right? We want to do away with emissions. And listen, no one is, more anxious for a better opportunity for my children and my little 4 grandchildren. They're the life of me, and I can't think about doing anything in this environment that could take away an opportunity for them, and we're very conscious of that. Are there things that we should be doing better? At least working hard to do better? Absolutely, and we're in constant discussions around that for a better environment for everyone. But I can tell you, if you look at every industrialized nation in the world, energy was an important part of their development. And if you want to look at the poorest nations in the world, ask them where their energy is located. And it's what brings us here today. So thank you guys. Any other questions or comments? Tommy?
In your long-term projections, where do you see gas leveling off at? Is it ever going to see below $3 again in your, say, 5-year projections? Or are we going to set the standard about where we're at now?
Well, let me tell you, on the street today, you can see fuel in the $3.50 range, upwards of $4. And that's dependent on the retailer. Keep in mind, just the credit card cost I shared with you a minute ago, right? So it works better. It works better for Lard Oil when fuel is less. Make no mistake about it. Our contracts are based on volume and not revenue. You probably will see us in the Baton Rouge Business Report. She mentioned we were currently 19, as high as number 9. Well, the driver of that has been not so much the volume of business we do, but what's happening to fuel prices. And those who read the magazine are thinking, boy, you guys are hitting it out of the park, when the fact of the matter is, we would prefer the consumer to have an extra $20, and maybe you'll go in and buy some chips and a drink and other items. So if I'm a guessing guy here today, and I shouldn't say just guessing, but I predict that there's a likely chance we could see fuel under $3. I think the market's going to push for that. It'll only take a few retailers out there, and you'll see some fall. A lot of that depends, though, on where this war goes.
I had one, so it's talking to you on the run guy over there about some places with the $3.50 a gallon. He says basically they're going to lose money on it, right?
We are. In fact, as of this morning, and this is before credit card cost, I was looking at Don's report, and in Livingston Parish, we were at about 6, Don, help me here, 6 cents a gallon replacement cost as of today. So if you add 10, 12 cents a gallon credit card cost, which is well into 90% of our business, we're upside down there today. And a few other locations as well. In the back of the room?
I own a small heavy equipment company with about a dozen pieces of heavy equipment. My fuel bill's about $6 grand a month, and I'm sure there's other business owners here who probably have the same question. Do you have any advice on things that we can do to reduce the cost? Obviously, I'm already conserving fuel as much as possible, but you mentioned like the credit card fees. Is that something we can pay in a different way and save on some of that, or is there any way that we can shave costs at all?
Well, Mike Doge here runs our fuel operation, and I'm not here to try to sell anybody anything. That's not what I'm here to do. But if you know your needs and it's fairly rateable, then you might want to hedge that. If the market gets to a point where the price you're comfortable with, and you know you're going to use 2,000 gallons a month, then it might be an opportunity to say, I don't care if prices collapse. I know I could run my business at this number. But what I don't want to do is see prices get to $5 or $6, and I didn't budget for that. And I won't say that's the only answer, but aside from you managing as best you can, keeping up with any kind of maintenance requirements to lessen the demand or usage, whether it be hours or mileage, I would suggest you continue to look at that. And keep in mind, we've got customers, so the misnomer is that, boy, prices are going up, you guys must be doing good. So we could be doing business with a company like yours that's doing 100,000 gallons a month. Can you imagine what his budget looks like? And can you imagine what our accounts receivable look like? And then the risk associated with our business when across the board, nearly 200 million gallons of product just went up by $1 a gallon. So, it's concerning. Trust me that we've had some very challenging conversations about preparing ourselves and to make sure we can endure the same things that consumers feeling today. But that's a great question, and if you'd like to talk more, Mike Doge or Wade Stevens would be the perfect guy to talk to. April?
Can you fill up in the morning? And then it's that thing about, certain times of day you get more gas for your money?
Yeah. So
Just kidding.
I think people do ask that question, will prices change at 5? If I go in the morning, temperature correction, because that plays in a little bit. It's not enough for you to be looking at doing anything buying 20, 30 gallons at a time. It just doesn't make a big difference. Did I miss anyone?
Is there any talks among the industry about, I know right now they're pulling off from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for the next 5 months now, probably. So what happens after, which I think people are attributing the drop in price a little bit to, but is that?
Yeah, I don't think that's enough to change what we've, witnessed here. And really not at all. I think it creates some hype. And I think what the administration is trying to say is we're doing all we can to try to help you. We go from E10 to E15. We're doing everything we can to try to help you. I think the biggest component of this today is managing our way back from the supply side to meet the demand that we see today, which has really been impacted. I have to tell you, if you look at, our stores and our dealer stores in the month of March, when we were seeing considerable increases, had a significant impact. So if we fix those two things and remove this uncertainty that the market does not like, and if it's going to respond because of uncertainty, it will not be in our favor. And those are the drivers through this. It is absolutely, that crude it's a global market, and it doesn't just have to happen here. It can happen anywhere in the world, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah, I wanted to get your perspective on the Keystone Pipeline. I know this administration has no desire to move forward with that, but your thoughts on, obviously it would take a long time for that to materialize. Your thoughts on what type of effect that could have on your industry?
Well, there's no question, you got an abundance of Canadian crude sitting there, right? Bakken. And to shut that off, basically say, environmental reasons and all the above, we've just taken a future opportunity, and that's what some of the questions have been about. Where do you see this going? Until we can, cut back the reliability, do whatever means that might be, we're going to continue to see this volatility. I think it's a huge mistake. I think, every company doing business in this state, in this country today, understands their responsibility. If there are those that are violating that, then remove their permitting. But to remove that because we're going to move the industry to electric vehicles and you're not going to need that, without the ability to really explain how you do that, I think is a mistake. And I hope it's one of the things that can recover quick. And I hope, the president could recognize this and says, you know what, let's look at the reasons we stopped it and look at the threat that we have without it. And hopefully they're having those discussions. Yes?
I know that there's a lot of people trying to move towards the green and less of the manufacturing of oil. Is there any companies that are trying to create healthier and more friendly manufacturing with the oil, so it's less intrusive and hurtful to the earth, I guess? Is there any new technologies coming out to kind of compromise, I guess, to be able to have the best of both worlds?
That is a great question, and it is absolutely responsibility of all oil companies to consider that. ExxonMobil made an announcement, help me, Mills, maybe a month or so ago. They announced that they brought in someone, was this from Chevy? I'm drawing a blank, but okay. And really to look at create a new division in ExxonMobil to look at all alternative sources beyond crude as we know it today to create a new source of energy. And there are a number of companies that are working very diligently in that space. And there'll be more to come, announcements, because that's what Wall Street is looking at, right? If you want to follow ExxonMobil stock, and anytime those exciting words come out, it's a great thing for them and shareholders. So I think it's the absolute right thing to do. Whether we're delivering fuel as we know it today or fuel as we know it into the future 10 years from now, I think you absolutely will see that. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much. I hope I answered most of your questions. April, thanks to you, the entire leadership team of the chamber, and all you do to support the business community in Livingston Parish. Thank you very much.
Awesome.